We don't want that flag. We don't want the anthem. We don't want this political class. We want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.
Do you want Britain out of the European Union? The Eurozone debt crisis shows no sign of abating. Does that mean this is the moment? Interestingly, the Foreign Secretary William Hague, always been in the past profoundly Eurosceptic, has been saying that it would be an economic disaster to have a referendum right now on membership of the EU. He says that the uncertainty would be hugely damaging to economic confidence. So he says this isn't the right moment. But Europe is an issue that has, well, it's a long-running sore, isn't it, for the Conservative Party? And last night, a former Tory treasurer defected to UKIP in protest over David Cameron's position on the EU. Lord Alexander Hesketh held a number of ministerial posts under Thatcher and Major. This morning, we've discovered that another high-profile Conservative here in Kent has also defected to UKIP. Janice Small is a former parliamentary assistant to Gravesham MP Adam Holloway and Dartford MP Gareth Johnson. She also stood as an MP at the last election, though she didn't win a seat. We'll be hearing from both Lord Hesketh and Janice Small. Where do you stand on this? Is it time for Britain to leave the EU? Let's be really precise about the moment in time, the Eurozone crisis. Does that make the arguments more or less powerful? In the past month, 5 Tories have abandoned the Conservative Party and joined the anti-Europe party UKIP. The latest, a former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Lord Hesketh, and here in Kent, Janice Small, who stood as a Tory candidate for Parliament in the last election. She's also defected to UKIP. Both cite our relationship with Europe as a key part of their decision. Let's find out a little bit more about Janice Small's decision. Welcome to BBC Radio Kent, Janice.
Morning.
How long had you been thinking about UKIP as your preferred choice? How long had you been flirting with the idea that they represented your views better than the Conservatives?
Shortly after the last general election, I fought a key marginal seat and I lost, and that's why David Cameron is in coalition with Nick Clegg. It was more compounded as well being in the coalition. The Lib Dems are a very pro-European party, and David Cameron is not being honest about our position in Europe and how it affects us. Yeah, it costs us £48 million a day. I've always been on the UKIP perspective of the Tory party, and people with my views are not welcome. Now, I was a female. I was promoted within the Conservative Party as a prospective parliamentary candidate. I was considered a safe pair of hands, but I was always hauled into central office to be stopped talking about Europe. Why are you banging on about Europe, Janice? Why do you go across the South East campaigning against the Lisbon Treaty in some of our target seats, such as for the last general election? And I said, because it is something that the people of Kent and the South East want to talk about. But you as a party, us as a party, we're not allowed to talk about EU and immigration, and those are two of the big issues out there.
When you say you were hauled in, how high up are we talking? Who hauled you in?
The head of the candidate department, who is a very senior person within the Tory party.
Would that have been on the say-so of David Cameron?
Ultimately, it would have been. I think I was slightly below David, but I was considered too subversive on the EU. So for a time, I actually didn't get interviews. I was getting interviews for Target. I was then allowed to go forward to safe seats because I didn't mention the dreaded EU. And then when I actually started mentioning the EU and campaigning across in Kent, I was dropped from various interviews, and then I had to go in and plead to be allowed back on the candidates list if I shut up about Europe, which I did to a degree, but if I was asked on the doorsteps what I thought, then I would tell people.
Is David Cameron and our other leading members of the Conservative Party not talking about Europe because they're trying to protect the coalition, because the coalition agreement specifies that this government will not seek to renegotiate its deal with Europe? Is that what it's all about? Is it all about protecting the coalition, in your view?
I think there's a degree of that. I mean, David Cameron was sold to the electorate, and I mean the party members, when he stood for leadership as the most Eurosceptic leader we're likely to have. So I abandoned David Davis, who was the other leadership candidate, but David Davis wasn't offering a referendum on Europe, so we voted, and lots of us voted for David Cameron, and his narrative died when he was actually selected and became leader, and then The Tory party are frightened to death of Europe. They believe it sort of tore them apart in 2001. Now, I was around in 2001, and it was an argument that the country wasn't prepared to have. Labour was still riding high. They were very pro-European as well. So it was a debate that was shut down. Yes, I do believe that the Dems have got a big hand in this, but actually I don't think David Cameron wants to have the debate on Europe. I mean, if you forgive the people that are affected by Tourette's out there, at the moment David Cameron has become somebody who's got Tourette's on speed over Europe. He actually believes we should be in Europe and run by Europe, and that's just untenable with the vast majority of Conservative voters and the Conservative Party. And actually his MPs as well.
Why now? Why now? I mean, you said you've been thinking about it since the election, and, some people would argue there's a bit of sour grapes there because you've been slapped down a bit about your positions on Europe. Is the Eurozone... Let me just ask you this. Is the Eurozone crisis your reasoning? Is this the right moment because of what's going on in the economic crisis in the Eurozone? Is this the right moment to renegotiate our position in Europe?
Absolutely. A lot of people in your region, in Kent, will work in the City of London, and this is another big reason why I have joined UKIP. There are going to be tens of thousands of jobs that are going to be lost in the City of London because of the Tories' voting record, and they are voting through the EU regulations to regulate the City of London. People don't understand how the Tories are actually voting for this. So if this Tobin tax goes through, which is known as the financial transaction tax, and the Tories actually can't stop this going through, they are going to lose thousands of jobs in the city. Michael Spencer, who is the head of ICAP, and he's also a major Tory party donor, has told David Cameron, as he's been in the press, and saying, if you bring in the financial transaction tax, I am taking my firm offshore. I am going to New York. HSBC at the moment, who employ 10,000 people in Canary Wharf, have already said they may go over to their home in Hong Kong. Now, a lot of your listeners may say, oh great, Tom P, great, but those bankers that have ruined this country again, that's another argument.
Janice, I'm really sorry. We're going to talk about this again soon, but your phone line has, the quality of the phone line that we're talking to you on has become so squelchy that it's really hard to hear your arguments distinctively. It's right, these things happen. I think we're going to put it out to our listeners now. I'm really grateful to you for coming on and explaining your position and your decision to move across to UKIP, and we're going to ask our listeners now what they think. Thank you. We're talking about Europe on BBC Radio Kent, and I'd still like to hear from you. Do you want Britain to stay in or to leave the European Union? Would you welcome a referendum? And why is now the moment? It is a decision that has caused havoc for political parties, mainly the Conservatives, to be fair. 5 Tories have defected to the UK Independence Party in the past month. In the last hour, we heard from local Janice Small, lives in Kent, has worked for local MPs in the past, and she has left, and she is incandescent that she was basically told she was gagged on the issue of Europe while she was in the Conservative Party. Well, very high profile now. Lord Alexander Hesketh has announced his decision in protest over David Cameron's stance on the European Union. Let's find out if that's the only reason he's left the Conservatives and he's joining the UK Independence Party, because Lord Hesketh joins us on Radio Kent now. Lord Hesketh, welcome to the show. Nice to have you with us this morning.
Nice to be with you, Julia.
Just Europe, or are there bigger issues at stake here?
Well, I think that the trouble is that Europe actually has managed to get its finger into everything, so there's hardly a part of our daily lives, our business lives, our working lives in this country which are not in some way or other affected by Europe. So it's in a sense, it's, I think, easier to keep it to Europe. I have to make one correction to what you introduced me as, which is that I'm not resigning because of David Cameron or because of his position on Europe. I'm resigning on the position that is held essentially by the establishment on Europe. Now, the lady who was referred to earlier, who was gagged, if she was going to remember the Tory party, I mean, that is I might say pretty much the case across all the big political parties. The Labour Party's record on this is probably the worst of the lot. Everyone seems to have forgotten that Gordon Brown signed the Lisbon Treaty, directly breaking a commitment made in the Labour Party election manifesto to hold a referendum. Now, the problem, Julia, and this is why I have resigned and joined UKIP, who are quite clear where they stand, is that the establishment, and if you go to Brussels and see the whole of the Grand Projet, as it's described by those who are enthusiastic for it, is you see that there is an objective. It is a political union. It is the end of sovereignty. It will be us joining into the Eurozone. And the results, I believe, for this country are catastrophic. And I think that for a long time there have been quite a lot of people, and the Conservative Party probably have discussed it more than any other. And as you know, there were terrible rows about it, and I was chief whip when the Maastricht Bill went through, so I don't know how many nights I didn't go to bed, but there were a hell of a lot of them, I can assure you. But the fact is that I don't believe that it's resolvable, and I think that is clearly shown right now with 17 members of the Eurozone countries quite incapable of coming up with a solution which is going to solve the problem they've got, which is actually sovereign debt created by creating the Eurozone and allowing people to borrow money which they were never going to be in a position to repay.
But wouldn't you have been more powerful staying within the Conservative Party and therefore within one of the two parties of government, some would argue, you know, far the more significant of the two parties of government, and arguing for a referendum? Because there are other voices and people are starting to talk about it. And whilst the Conservative Party managed to keep quiet on Europe at the party conference, there are voices bubbling to the surface all the time, and everyone expects UKIP to say we need to renegotiate, but to hear a leading voice in the Conservative Party arguing that would have been far more powerful, surely.
Well, I don't think I would have been given the platform. I mean, I've been to many a party conference in my time. I mean, I remember at one where they actually tried to prevent Norman Tebbit, who was, you know, a man of great stature, or is a great stature, but had only just left the government. And my advice was taken. I said, you've got to let him on. And very reluctantly they did. But, you know, there is in modern politics, I'm afraid, a terrific degree of control freakery. And the real problem, Julia, I believe, and this is why I have joined a party which actually believes in freedom, is that the people of this country, and I might say most other European countries, their views are not respected. The political establishment, and that is the press, the media, the civil service in Whitehall, at a local government level, at a high level, certainly throughout Brussels, and all that goes with that, say, yes, we want to listen to the people. I mean, my example is this. If you want to have a big society, well then, if the big society says it doesn't like something, you should pay attention to it. You can't actually say the decision was taken in 1975. So
a referendum now, or at least before the next election, I mean, some people have speculated that the Labour Party is going to steal a march on the Conservatives and they're going to promise a referendum in their campaigning before the next election. Is that what you want, a referendum as soon as possible?
Well, I think there's going to be one, and I'll tell you why there's going to be one. I don't think that the Labour Party claim they're stealing a march, considering there are probably more unemployed Labour voters in this country who are unemployed, who do not actually realise they're probably unemployed because of the Labour Party's very, very casual attitude to Europe, may well be voting and finally wake up to the fact that they don't want to be supporting what the Labour Party are going to be talking on in a referendum.
Lord Hesketh, we'll leave it there, but it's been really interesting having you on the programme. Be interesting to see your role develop within the UK Independence Party in the months to come. Thank you for your time today.
OK, Julia, thank you.
Lord Hesketh came to fame, you might remember, running the Hesketh Formula One team back in the 1970s, been heavily involved in the motorcycle industry as well. He has left the Conservatives and joined the UK Independence Party. He says it's the only place where you can speak openly in Britain about Europe.
We don't want that flag. We don't want the anthem. We don't want this political class. We want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.